All right. And then we are officially live and we're ready to go. All right. Let's begin in 3, 2, 1. Yo, yo, yo. What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our returning guest, Robert Garcia. We're here to break down Retribution, Chapter 3, The Abyss, and everything in between. And before we fall into vengeance, Robert, welcome back to the stream. How have you been since our last chat? I mean, last time we had you on was interview 62. This is interview, I think, what, 334? Like, holy crap, man. Like, how's it been since you last been on?
It's been good. I just don't know how you do it. I mean, I spent time in radio, and I used to have to do shows daily, and it takes so much out of you. So props, massive props, Cody, for where you're at and where you continue to grow. And just
thank you.
Just don't forget me, okay? Just don't forget.
I
won't. Further issues coming out.
I won't. We need to get you on for Chapter 4, Chapter 5. You know, this is an ongoing thing. So for anyone who is tuning in for the first time, you know, let's give a little bit of a recap of who you are and, you know, how you got into this industry.
Well, again, my name's Robert. Basically, I am an ex-crime reporter. I used to work throughout the Southwest, everywhere from Tucson, Arizona to El Paso to Austin, Texas. Covered crime through all those areas for a little bit more than a decade. And
what goes into that? Like, not to interrupt you, that is interesting. Like, are you like on the scene like afterwards or like mid time? Like,
dude, you show up. Afterwards, you show up exactly as it's happening. I always tell people I've seen more dead bodies than I ever want to see, and I need to see. There's nothing more like just jarring to actually get to a scene like before the police get there or something, and they're not able to like tape everything off yet, and you see somebody, and it's just So basically, the book that I was writing when I was a reporter was just talking about a lot of these experiences and just talking about trauma. And we've talked about how Retribution is just all based on trauma. That's what the story is about. And then 10 years ago, 15 years ago now, fell back in love with comics. And as I was writing this book, I decided, you know, let me see if I can convert this into a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, one of the things about it. You've read the first 2 issues, and it's more of a story. You know, comics are built in these like 4-issue arcs and so on. But this is a little bit more, I don't want to say dragged out, but I'm trying to add a little more depth to the story as far as background on characters and things that are going on. So a lot of what is in the comics is what I say is fiction or kind of real fiction, because some of these stories are things that I covered during my time. A lot of them are personal experiences that I grew up with. Also experiences that I just had many friends go throughout life. And it really talks about trauma and understanding trauma. You know, we do a lot like, well, how to deal with trauma, but I want people to understand it and like where it comes from. And that's what I'm trying to do with this series. And we did it with this this character that we created, R. And there's a lot to his backstory. There's a lot to like what he is now, the entity he is now, because this is something that's going to continue to be revealed throughout the series, because I'm a big sci-fi fan, and I decided to tie sci-fi into this as well. But it is the best thing I can say about the comic, and if you go to the Kickstarter, you can see this, is that I put comments up, I put reactions up, not of like, you know, reviewers, of what the readers do. And I have really, truly been happy with how this book is connected with so many people. And the fact that like some people are like, wow, this just like really hits home. This really reminds me of growing up, because it ties so many things into it. It ties being a Mexican American, growing up throughout the Southwest, growing up with a traditional, you know, Mexican type of father, and how that can, you know, be how that can affect you, some of the traumas and just a father-son type relationship. You know, those are the type of stories that I love the best when I read Thor and, you know, Thor and Odin, and you read these stories, and it just really has to do a lot with this young man and where he's going. But you know, just covering crime and all these things that I saw, I just wanted to kind of like get these things out of my head, and I feel like by writing about them and doing this comic, it's helped me out.
I was about to say, you know, you mentioned the father-son dynamic, and you have Thor Ragnarok right behind you. That was like where Odin died, isn't it?
Yep. That was the movie where he died. But that was it, and that was the comic that really basically made me fall in love with comics itself. I've always been a big fan of comic art, and that's one of the things that we really try to drive home with this series. And this is why I'm going broke. And Cody, if you got any money, I'd love a loan. You've seen the book. And the one thing I pride myself on is that we have got incredible artists. Julie Guilazzi, who's jumped on from the very beginning, she's out of Italy. She now is doing stuff for Marvel. She's doing stuff for Image. She's doing stuff for Boom.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Marvel and I'm sorry, no, Marvel and Dark Horse. But anyway, she has exploded. Kevin Keane did the second issue. He does our variant covers, the ones that we do with the foil covers. He does a ton of stuff for Todd McFarlane. He does a lot of covers for Spawn,
Hmm.
Gunslinger Spawn, for Scorched, for King Spawn. I mean, he's just all over the place. And now this issue, Scott Oakley, who had his own Kickstarter, Valaro, which will be coming out soon, he has jumped on board, and Scott has done variant covers for the first two issues. And the big thing, what I really wanted to produce for people is a comic that visually is stunning, something that is, it's gritty, it's noir.
You nailed it.
Yeah, it is very much a Frank Miller-ish in a sense, and that's what I'm trying to bring, because I think the mood of my story is best set in a black and white environment. There is blood, so you've got that gore aspect to it, but it's just something to where, with these issues, what I wanted to do is try to get the most dynamic artists I could find to really be able to depict the story to where it visually matches what we're writing. And actually, I think the visuals exceed what I've written.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, just working as a crime reporter, that had to have taken a toll on you. Like,
Oh yeah.
so this comic was kind of your way of just getting that out.
Yeah, just some kind of like a cathartic thing. And I'll be blunt. I mean, there are things that I still have nightmares about. I mean,
Yeah.
you sit in a courtroom, you see photos of like what an average person will do to like a child or something, and it just tears you up inside, especially if you've got kids and you see these things, and it's just it puzzles the hell out of you. But then you have to realize that everybody's going through something in some way or another. They're just things that for me, I just really wanted to like get these out of my head, but also be able to tell a story around them, and that's what we're doing here. But yeah, it's no fun. I make the joke about it, and I hate to say it, but that's one of the weirdest things about this. Okay, so one of the things that I learned, and it's so, I think, weird to anybody who's outside of that bubble, is when you show
Hmm.
up on a scene where somebody sadly has been murdered or somebody has died. You get there, and it's the media, and you're talking to the police, and you get the fire department, and everybody is kind of lighthearted and making jokes, and people are like, oh my god, how can you do that? It's because if you sat there and you let the intensity of what just happened soak in every day when you're covering these stories, like, you would just fracture, you'd fall apart. You,
Yeah.
you have to create these walls that people do to try to just deal with it and just move forward every day. I mean, when I was in Tucson, so Tucson is like you have Pima County, you have Williamson County, and I hate saying this, but Tucson has a pretty high crime rate. I mean, when I was out there, for the size of city that it always ranked top three as far as deaths and all that. So I mean, it was literally about every fourth day when I came in. It's like, okay, where am I going? What murder am I covering? What death am I covering? And it was just constant. And you sit there and you cover it, day after day, and just these things that happen, all different types of stories, from smugglers bringing in immigrants and leaving them out in the desert to die in the heat because they have no idea that, no, the city isn't a mile away, the city is like 300 miles away, and you're not going to make it. And then just sadly, when I was out there was a big issue with methamphetamines, and that was a big issue that people dying that way. And then just
Hmm.
anything from the basic husband and wife, and husband decides to take his wife's life and then takes his life, and you show up on these stories, and they just all like have this impact on you, and you just have to build up these walls, because if you really truly let it all come in, I don't know anybody who'd be able to handle it. And it's something that I used to talk about so much with, especially the police officers and the firemen. It's like, what do you do? Like, how do you deal with just seeing so much trauma on a daily basis?
Man, holy crap. You say you're impressed with the amount of interviews I've done. Like, I'm impressed with the amount of work you've done, like, in the past, and we're able to keep coming back to it. I mean, that's remarkable. So I do want to dive into this. It is black and white with blood, being the visual, very
Yep.
striking red. Now it would be, I guess, a basic question for me to ask why. Obviously we can assume why. It's a little bit cheaper. That red strikes out just so much. That bleeds Frank Miller. Sin City, I love it. But
Yep.
why the obsession? Why the addiction to killing and vengeance? Is that something that is kind of like a trick up your sleeve, or can we talk a little bit about that?
It's so the whole story, it's called Retribution for a reason, and it's because that's what almost every character that's tied into this story is trying to get in some way or somehow.
Hmm.
And so, you have a character in in his previous life who, um, let's just say, accepted everything. Accepted the trauma that happened to him, was unable to release so much that has gone on with him, and this kind of ties into like stories or like comics like The Boys. It is
Hmm.
when you hand over this power to somebody who has been through a lot, how are they going to react? What are they going to do? And then falls into question. We have, as we go through the first two issues, third issue, we have these people who are pretty horrible people doing pretty horrible things that he is getting, revenge against or retribution against. And then we have to start asking ourselves, like, morally, is this correct? Is this the way that you handle these things? And I think that's kind of the fracture that goes on with him, because for him, if you read chapters 1 and 2, you realize, chapter 1 was just purpose. He came back with a purpose. He was brought
Hmm.
back with this purpose that he was supposed to seek vengeance for the death of the person that he loved. But again, that vengeance has changed into something different, and that's what I think. He's starting to grasp a little bit on, and then you're starting to try to figure out, like, what is that purpose behind it, the overall purpose. The first chapter is called Purpose. Second chapter, it was just simple. It's like, I died in Del Rio because that's where he died.
Yeah, yeah.
So he made that one real simple. And then the Abyss, we really start digging more into who he is, what is that fractured inside of him, and we really start to see some of the traumas that he's gone through.
Hmm.
First couple issues, we see the traumas that other people are going through and the decisions that he's. It's not that he's making those decisions; he's told to do these things, so he's just following on his path that he's been given to go out there and get this retribution.
And I
Now, in the
really
third issue.
loved.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cody. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I really loved an issue two. We see a prime example of that where R is getting ready to take someone's life, and he sees their trauma. So it was like a catch-22. He's able to take their life. That's toxic. He loves it. He bathes in the blood. But now he's starting to see their trauma, and it rises. It brings up the question, like, this is person was a product of their environment. He's only doing what he's been taught to do, and I thought that was such a really impressive way of like writing and scripting it to kind of like turn the tables around like that.
And honestly, as a writer, like right now, you make me want to get a tear in my eye, because you capture it perfect. You capture it perfectly, and that is this dilemma that he's killing this person who obviously has done some horrible things, but he decides, because he makes his connections with his victims, he decides to dive a little bit more into what this person, was thinking, because he's trying to see, like, what other, horrible, traumas this person has imposed upon others. But then he ends up seeing what has happened to this person, and that is just like a bolt of shock to him, because he's somebody who has gone
Hmm.
through these traumas. So now he's understanding that the person that he's seeking this retribution on is basically him, in a sense, because it's a person. But there are differences in the sense of
Yeah.
how do we handle those traumas. Some people, as they grow up, if they go through those traumas, they end up just continuing those traumas onto another person, onto another, onto another. Others decide to internalize those traumas, and those traumas become something of who they are and how they
Hmm.
feel about themselves, and that trauma now is directed at themselves. And then you have other people who can't handle the trauma and decide, hey, I don't want to be around here anymore, and they make those decisions to not be here. And I think those are all the aspects that we're trying to dive into, because it is all about how do you handle this trauma, this grief, and what do you do with it. And I think that is a big player in the story. And seriously, like, you nailed it by catching that there, because that is a big player in the story as this goes on, because there's a lot into A, having to experience trauma, B, having to deal with trauma, and then C, how do we move on from that trauma? And I think that is what is going to be continued to be, divulged, I guess, as we go through these chapters.
So we have our good friend CM Holy, Chris Moses of the Saturn Effect, joining us over on Twitch, dropping some emojis. Thank you for joining us, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank
So,
you.
man, holy crap! I just love digging deeper into this. With trauma being like the catalyst, like what was the purpose of that? Yeah, I know this is kind of like your way of like getting it out, but like why have such a hard focus on trauma?
I think because not only is it something that I've dealt with on a personal level, uh, father son type issues, everything from I used to always make the joke. So I am Mexican American. My father's from Mexico. I was born here in the United States, but I lived in Mexico as a child. Came here, and as you can see, I'm pretty pink. Okay, so
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the white Mexican. And so first off, just on the simplest level, just the traumas of being teased and ripped upon by people of my own culture who do not view me as a Mexican, and then a father who would see me as this very light skinned boy and not view me as well as a Mexican, and the things that I would be told, and just the trauma that I went through growing up in life. And sadly, as we get into chapter 3 and we get into chapter 4 and so on, a lot of these traumas that we're hitting on are traumas that I experienced in my youth, and they're really rough things that I internalized for a long time in my life. So, and then here I go, and I end up moving forward in my life, and I become a reporter, and then I ended up covering crime, and then to be able to see trauma that is basically enacted upon others, and seeing how they handle it and what they go through, and talking to so many people about it, and just having friends growing up. It was weird for me. One of the things that I did when it came to like handling traumas, I usually like to be there for other people in
Hmm.
any kind of a way. Just talk to me, and in some ways, like I'd give them all this advice, and I'd help all these other people. But yet, I never ever took that advice for myself, and never ever helped myself.
It's
And so,
impossible to do, right?
yeah, yeah, it's so hard. It's so I mean, it's funny when I was growing up. So many people like, oh, I love talking to you. Like you're so helpful. And I've made these great friendships, and I'm able to speak to all these people, and give them this great advice. But I never took it myself, and it was something to where it took years upon years to try to really open up this box and figure out, okay, what happened, and then a lot of it, like, you don't want to remember. I don't think
You
anybody
repress
wants
it,
to remember.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want
Trauma's
to
a
remember.
funny thing. It's
Yeah,
it's you often either like you go through it and it is an experience in which your mind will literally force you to forget it to protect you from those thoughts. Like it is
yep,
insane what trauma can do. There's parts of my childhood where I totally didn't remember until someone's like, "Yeah, this happened." And
yeah,
I'm like, "What do you mean?" And
yeah.
and like the trauma, the traumatic experience, tying that with humor too. Like sometimes all you could do is just laugh about it because
Oh yeah.
that's all you can do, or it'll break you. Like, man, and it could be a dark pit. And I think right now would be the perfect segue. Let's go ahead and dive into the abyss and check out this
Okay.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, let's do that.
Hey, that's
So,
probably my best segue right there. I'll say. Hey, give me 1 second. Let me. We're gonna add it to
yeah.
screen real quick.
And I do want to say, great news. We've got almost 3 weeks left. I think 20 days. And as you can see, as you pop that up, we are almost at goal. So basically, we're like $60, $70 away from hitting our goal. But I really, really want to exceed this because I've never been able to do anything to where I could, do the rewards and send them back to people. We've had 2 successful
Hmm.
Kickstarters. I am not. I mean, I'll just be blunt. I'm not looking to make all my money back because I can promise you, our goal is way more than what I paid for our artists
Yeah.
to work on this comic. My biggest thing is I want to deliver something that's just visually stunning. But what I'd like to do is we can get rewards in. I love my logo. I want to have my logo out there. I want to put it on coffee cups. I want to
Hmm.
put it on whatever and get it out to people. You've made T-shirts. I'd love to have a T-shirt. Retribution on it, and there's just things that I would like to be able to give people back. And then the cool thing is what we did this with this Kickstarter, and again, Scott Oakley and Julie Gulazzi, they have their art on the inside. The main cover is done by Julia. I always love doing tribute covers. On the first issue, we did a Thor tribute cover because that was my comic growing up. On the second one, we did a tribute cover to Iron Maiden, like because Eddie, those albums were just phenomenal back
Hmm.
in the 80s. This with this comic, we did a tribute to the Amazing Spider-Man number 301, which I mean, the Amazing Spider-Man. That cover by Todd McFarlane has been done a million times, but Rodney Ford, who is actually the artist who first helped me truly capture Retribution, because this was a character that I had in my mind. I had a whole pattern on his face. I'm a horrible artist, so I couldn't draw him, and I had gone to a couple people to try to truly get what I wanted, and Rodney Ford just nailed it. And so he did a cover for us. If you just scroll down a little bit, that right there, that's Julia's cover, and it's a phenomenal cover right there. Again, the first 50 people who sign up are going to get a special little print thing that I have from that Scott Oakley just doing some insane art. I was like,
Is the
you
cover
put your
down?
arm through him. I'm like, what are you doing? You put your arm through him.
Is the cover like down or?
I'm sorry.
The cover that I'm looking for, is that down further?
Yeah. Keep going
Okay,
down
all
a little bit because you'll see where the variant covers are.
And then we'll scroll back up to check out the interiors up there.
Yeah, so those are the different packages, the different tiers. If you just want to get the physical copy with Julia's cover and the sticker set, that's $11. I try to keep the prices lower because I know how things go. If you scroll down a little bit more, there you see the tribute cover that Rodney Ford did, and we'll get a better look at that. And then after that, you've got the red foil cover done by Kevin Keane, the incredible artist who just does some great black and white art, who's working with Todd McFarlane. If you scroll down a little bit further more, you'll see that you get, if you want to do all three covers, you can do that. And then we've got one spot left. So I basically opened it up for 3 different people to be in the comic book if they wanted to. So if you want to be in Retribution, we will draw you in. Sadly, there's only one spot left on that.
It's a fantastic price at $126 though. Holy crap.
Yeah, like I said, I try not to go overboard. I understand it's tough for everybody right now, so I'm not trying to, break anybody's bank. And, I buy comics myself, so I understand how expensive it can be. But what we're doing, if you scroll down a little bit more, we're also doing our first graphic novel. And that's the Kevin Keane cover for it right there. It's a cover that he did for issue 1. I wanted to bring it back because I just love the black and white. I mean, that to me is just so visually stunning what he did there. And so the graphic novel is going to have all 3 issues. There's going to be some tweaks throughout the issues. And also there's going to be a lot of art inside of it. So it's right now I'm thinking it'll be anywhere from 102 to 110 pages. It's going to have, like I said, all 3 issues, and it's going to have tons of artwork in there. So I'm hoping people really like what we're doing there. And then that's the creative thing down there. Go ahead.
So is this is issue 3 the finale in the series, or is it going to be an ongoing series after it?
Oh no. Yeah. This right now I've already got basically 8 stories that I'm writing right now. I jump in and out of all of them, but I'm thinking we're going to run anywhere from 8 to 10 stories.
Okay. So let's check out some of these interiors as well. Just gorgeous. I love. I just love. Shoo. This is beautiful, and I love right here seeing him come from like that. Like this is like visually striking.
What we did with this issue is, again, this one we're really starting to dive into R, and this is something that just, I'll be blunt, just ties into a lot of like what I feel, and so where he ends up going, because at the end of chapter 2, we see him kind of get mad at Chi, and he breaks away from her, and he goes back to a place that brought him peace, and that's out in Marfa, Texas, which is a beautiful place to go to, especially at night, because you look up into the sky, you see the Milky Way, you see everything. It is just incredible. And so he goes back there and he's just kind of reminiscing about his time spent with her. He's sitting on top of the observation area out there in Marfa, and he's just looking up at the sky, and he's just going through his mind and just trying to get a grasp of like what's happened over the last couple of days since he's been back, and trying to get a grasp on himself as well. And so what I also do with each issue is I have a stanza, a poem, whatever you want to call it. I try to put one page, and if you scroll up a little bit right there, that's another one drawn by Julia, the red one. I'm sorry. Yeah, scroll down. That one right there. And we try to deal with the topic. And the first one was more of an introduction. The second one deals with pain. This one deals with depression. And he just kind of gives you like his thoughts of like how he felt about his depression and how he handled his depression. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see this is where Scott's art starts to pick up. If you go down a little bit there, and this is like Scott. Obviously, this is R encountering another person who was trying to do something pretty horrible. And so obviously R has decided, hey, we've got to do, well, I say R has decided, but it's he's guided. Okay. He's being guided by Chi throughout this whole series. And so he goes to different locations and he finds these people and he sees what's about to happen. Obviously, he intervenes and so on. And then one of the big things that we introduce in the chapters you go down there is, if you're going to be doing all these bad things, eventually people are going to start to notice. And there's a character there, Mateo, who is going to become an integral part of this story as we keep moving on and on. And Mateo, same thing. He was born in Mexico, came to the United States, served for this country, served over in Afghanistan. And there's going to be this history, things that he's experienced and that he knew about and that remind him of what he's seen, because he's hearing about these killings and he decides, hey, I need to look into this. And so he becomes another part of this story as we move forward, because again, if you're doing a lot of bad things, people tend to notice. And that was the one thing too. I'm trying to make this as real as possible. We're writing a comic, we're dealing in the
Hmm.
world of sci-fi and so on, but I don't want to like go way out there and just. I didn't want it to be your typical superhero book, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything that bad against those books because I love them. I read them, I buy them. Batman I read all the time. Chip Zdarsky. If it's written by Chip Zdarsky, I'm going to buy it. I mean, there's just certain guys I got to get, but I wanted to do something that's just going to really have this depth about like who this person is, where he comes from, what has brought about him, and then just the different type of people that he's going to end up interacting with and so on.
So I really love, like I said, the black and white usage, and just how you see like all this negative space, like this computer monitor right here, just flat black. How these bushes and the foliage just bleeds into like just the gutter of the page, like just phenomenal. What was some of this direction with you and the creative team? I mean, did you have these ideas like scripted, or did you kind of let the artist take the wheel and run with it?
So as far as the look itself, it's something that I always wanted. I always wanted black and white. I love black and white comics. I love Frank Miller. I'm a huge fan of Sin City, the comic, but the movie. I mean, just the way it is, and for me, I just love black and white art. I mean, I really, I mean, I think color is a beautiful thing, but I think
Hmm.
black and white adds another depth to like what you're looking at, and it just adds just this tone. And so I knew black and white was what I wanted to do, and I knew it was going to add the right tone, the right emotion into the comic, and so that's what I went with. But when it comes to the artists, honestly, I give them about as much free reign as possible. If there's something that I don't feel is being depicted right because it's not really describing R's emotion, because I think that's one of the things that I really want to bring through in this comic is that you get to see his emotions, you get to see what
Hmm.
goes on inside of him. I'll do that, but outside of that, I've been, knock on wood, I've had some incredible people who I'm working with. Like I said, Julie Gulazzi, Kevin Keane, Scott Oakley, Kath Lobo does our covers. She's works for DC. She works with.
Wow.
I mean, I have been so fortunate to work with incredible people. Rodney Ford, who is like my guy because he's the one just like who really helped me bring this character to where I wanted to be, because it's so hard when you're trying to develop a character because there's so many out there, and people like, oh,
Hmm.
this kind of reminds me of Spawn or kind of reminds me of Deadpool. And I'm like, hey, you can only do so much to differentiate yourself. But the fact was, I knew what his background was going to be, and I knew what was going to create him. So I wanted to stick to these cores that I had in my head as to how he was going to visually look, and these artists have just nailed it.
I love it. I love it so much. Everyone that is watching, right here is a link. Be sure to back this today. If you're unable to back, simply putting it on Twitter and Facebook. Word of mouth is 100% free. It costs nothing,
Yep.
and it gets this as far as possible. You might have a friend or a family member who would love this comic. So even if it might not be your taste, you probably have someone out there who will love it just as much. So that being said, let's go ahead and switch over to our other feed. And Robert, after going through that Kickstarter, for anyone who might be teetering on that fence about backing it, what would you like to say to them just to kind of help push them over?
I would say if you want a story that just really is gonna provide you some depth, and truly understanding about trauma, I think that's one of the things that I want people to grasp it. I can just say the comic is worth it just for the art. I mean, you're getting
Hmm.
like top level artists, and I'm going broke paying these artists, but I don't care because this story is very personal. It's very important to me, and I've already made the joke. I mean, even if knock on wood, it looks like we're gonna have our third Kickstarter funded, and we've been really fortunate with that. And I thank all the people who backed it so much. But this is something that I will not stop doing. I want to get this whole story out. I love what we've been able to create. I can say if you go to the Kickstarter, you'll see the reviews from the
Hmm.
readers, not from critics. And because I've put up critics reviews before on our last Kickstarter, but this time I was just like, I mean, if you go to my Instagram at Cheesy Comics Shop, at Cheesy Comics Shop, you'll see I love posting what the readers have to say, because it just like you, Cody, how you grasp that one moment in chapter two, people really identify with this. So, if anything, I think that's the best selling point.
Yeah.
Is if you're looking for a comic that's going to hit, possibly hit home with you, it's something that we all deal with. We all deal with trauma in one way or another, and I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with this comic. So I think that's the best recommendation I could give is go to the Kickstarter, read what people have to say, and I don't have the prices set extremely high. I understand everybody's got a budget, but yeah, we'd love to have you as a backer, and love to have you as a future reader, because things. I keep telling people. Well, I was telling people after issues 1 and 2, it's going to start to get crazy. Okay, so if you're gonna jump on, that's the best selling point. 3, 4, 5, 6. Bonkers.
It's already got pretty crazy in chapter 2. We've seen someone with their pants pulled down get ripped in half. I mean, so Robert,
that was out there.
I got to ask you, what's next for you in 2023? Is it just Retribution, or is there any other projects up your sleeve?
It's that. It's. I'm totally focused on Retribution. Chapter 4, Everybody Lies, which I can tell you that that's probably going to be an issue there. That will be coming out. And then chapter 5, we're hoping to have out by 24, or maybe even earlier. It all depends on like how well this Kickstarter does, because the better the Kickstarters do, the quicker I can pay my artists, the quicker we can move forward on these projects, because they're written. I do the lettering. We get them out real quick. I mean, that's also been a really big selling point. Is literally when we finish that Kickstarter, we go right to print. So we get these comics back out to everybody and get them sent out. So yeah, just chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, who knows?
Let's go. And guys, right here is that link to, once again, be sure to back. And if you can't put it out there for free, retweeting it costs nothing. You know, let's make this dream happen. So, Robert, you've been on the show before. You know the drill. I get to ask a little bit of advice for anyone who might be interested in getting into indie comics. And with that being said, I think I have a question that is perfect. So for anyone looking to write from their own experiences, what would be some of your advice to kind of take that and make it like comic book, suitable?
Share it with as many people as you can. I think so many times, like when I started jumping into making this into a comic, people are like, oh, don't show it, somebody's going to rip it off, and blah, blah, blah. Get it out there. Get people's reactions, because you want to see how people are reacting. As I mentioned, I was writing a story. I wasn't writing a comic. I had to know how to write in that comic genre better. And I think just be true to yourself. Be true to what you feel and the story that you want to tell. Don't verge away from it. We are our own best, what's the word I want to use? Advisors, okay? Because if you write something that's coming from your heart, that's coming from your mind, it's going to have that depth and that realism about it. So, just stick to your guns, write about what you feel, and let people read it and get feedback. Feedback's always fantastic, good or bad. Feedback's the best thing you could ever get.
That's so awesome, Robert. Thank you so much for swinging by and breaking down Retribution and catching up. It's always a blast to get a returning guest back on the show. Everyone watching, be sure to check out that link. And like I said, if you can't back it, put it on Facebook and Twitter. Word of mouth is 100% free. I hope you all have a lovely Saturday. I have to get ready for a father-daughter dance. So you're going to see me all snazzy up on Twitter and Instagram soon. With that being said, it's time to take off. I will. Get ready to shave. So with that being said, guys, it's time to wrap up. I hope you all have a lovely day, but most importantly, keep it geekly. All right, give me 1 second. We're going to end recording.